Good afternoon and welcome to today's Stahls TV presentation on calculating cost and selling prices for your CAD-CUT heat transfer material. I'm Josh Ellsworth with Stahls TV, and we have an action-packed presentation as usual. If you only slated 45 minutes for today's class, we'll definitely get through the calculating cost portion, but the setting selling prices is going to take a little bit longer for the whole presentation. So I extended the presentation to be an hour and 15 minutes and hope to conclude on time, but just wanted to give you the heads up in advance, and know, as always, this will be recorded and posted on Stahls TV within by tomorrow to make sure you have that. So without further ado, I want to share the results of the poll that we launched, and that was how many employees do you have in your shop? And we had 40% of the audience had 1 employee, 40% 2 to 3, and 13% 11 plus, 7% 4 to 6. So a pretty good range of businesses. So regardless of what size your business is, calculating cost is an important part of the process, and I want to switch over to my screen to sort of walk you through some different considerations. So number one is when you're calculating accurate cost for heat transfer film, obviously we're talking about rolls of material that are being vinyl cut, weeded, and heat applied. So a general calculating cost equation is on the screen in front of you. So whether it's for building a house, creating a t-shirt, basically manufacturing a product, this is the way to figure it out. The first piece we have is direct labor and materials in our equation. So direct labor refers to the actual manufacturing labor that goes into building the actual house, or in this case, making the actual t-shirt. So this is any part of the production workflow, any of your employees or you acting in a role that contributes to cutting, weeding, or heat application. Then of course we have the materials. You see the worker there carrying the lumber. In case our materials for decorating apparel, of course, are the blank apparel item itself, as well as the heat transfer film, the material that's going to be consumed with the building of each shirt. So we'll go through how to calculate direct labor and materials, and actually I'm going to make it really easy for you. We're going to give you a cost calculator that you can download on Stahls TV that's going to calculate this for you, but I want you to understand the premise of it as well. We're going to add that direct labor and materials into overhead. So overhead is a piece that needs to be applied to every single job. And there's a way to do this. And the nice thing about capturing overhead with how I'm going to show you today as a rate or as a percentage is going to allow you to apply those indirect expenses, such as your rent, your electricity, marketing expense, all these expenses that don't go into the direct manufacturing of the product but are still an expense for your business. What we find is if you're not calculating overhead into the cost calculation, you're going to leave yourself short and potentially unprofitable when you compare the profit gained at the end of the year towards your revenue that you've sold. You may not have as much profit as you expected if you don't calculate overhead. And then, so if we add those two things together, we're going to equal the total cost of the product. So that's going to be the gist of calculating costs, and there's a lot more to it. So I want to dive in on the direct labor and materials. And as always, if you have a question, please type it in. I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions today. Karen Ross is here to help me, and she'll stop me throughout the presentation to fire in questions that I can answer for you. So I put the little quote here: if you work for free, we're hiring. Unfortunately, you know, it's meant to be funny, but unfortunately many of us, especially the smaller businesses, the 1 or the 2 to 3 employees that are friends and family, often fail to calculate their labor as part of the cost. So when we talk about direct labor and materials, we're talking about that manufacturing labor, including paying yourself if you're the one weeding and heat applying, and we're talking landed cost of material. So I'm going to pull up on the screen a bit of detail in those two components as we work to calculate direct labor and materials. So if we look in the top right box, you see a direct labor rate calculation. And so this is a suggestion for calculating a labor rate of creating a shirt or creating a design. So ultimately, it doesn't take hours to create a shirt unless you're doing something really intricate and crazy. It should take minutes. So I recommend figuring out how many minutes it takes you to complete each particular design, and then ultimately trying to figure out a cost per minute for your labor rate at each part of the process, whether that's weeding or heat application which are the two primary costs, labor costs, associated with customizing with heat transfer films for making apparel. So a good sample that directly below you'll see is if we have 2 minutes per shirt, roughly, for a design. If I'm paying the employee or myself $10 per hour, I'm going to divide that by 60 minutes, and ultimately I'm going to get about 17 cents in labor per minute. That's going to be my rate, 16.7 cents. So simple math would show you 2 minutes times that labor rate equals 33 cents. So this is a little bit of the logic that we're going to see when we look at this cost calculator tool that you have access to, how it's calculating. Next, we look at that landed cost of material. And a lot of people fail to calculate freight as part of cost of materials, and that's why we say landed cost. So you want to do the garment with the freight that it takes to get the garment to you. Now obviously when you start to calculate freight as part of the cost for a particular job, you may need to make some assumptions and calculate some averages, but you want to order smart, and that's going to be one of our cost saving tips that I'll share with you later, is grouping together those apparel orders, perhaps from the same vendor, in order to save on shipping. And then of course if you can find somewhere local or with free shipping, that's going to help you as well. And then ultimately the heat transfer, or the roll, in this case of CAD-CUT material, with freight. So while I have a yard rate for a 5-yard roll, how much it costs per yard, I need to make sure I take into account my ordering habits with how I stock and order materials. And if I'm not getting free freight on the roll, I need to make sure I figure out my average freight costs per yard. And so in the calculator we do this for you in a way that makes it simple, where we apply an average freight cost to the rolls of film based on our flat rate $5 shipping program from Stahls. So we'll give you a quick sample below, and then we're going to go through a little bit more in depth on this later as we talk about setting selling prices. But 36 shirts at $1.99 each for the shirt plus $12.92 in freight equals $84.36. Divide that by 36, you can quickly see how freight is 36 cents of the cost, or equaling $2.35. The same thing with the transfers, a screen printed transfer in this case, or a CAD-CUT transfer. You get the point. Freight needs to be a part of it when you're figuring out what that landed cost is. I just want to make sure we're all following along well. Karen, any questions at this point? Yeah, we can make it available for everybody. We'll export this presentation to a PDF, and we will send it out to all attendees. You got that, Karen, as an action item? We can do that. Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, Karen wants me to ask if anybody's having video issues. If you are, can you please type that in with keeping up with the presentation? Okay, it seems like we're only 1 or 2, so it could be a connection on your end. Okay. All right, so thank you very much. So let's move on to the next slide with overhead. So much like I said, if you're working for free, we're hiring. If your building is free, we're moving in. So the fact is, whether you're operating out of a retail storefront, some sort of production space, or even in your home, ideally, you would be applying some sort of cost that's going to fall into your overhead from a lease or rent standpoint. And of course, taxes, property taxes fall into that as well. So even if you're out of your home and you're a small business, make sure you apply that cost into your overhead. And so what we want to do is this is not an exhaustive list, but here's some of the things that fall into overhead that we're going to need to calculate. Accounting and legal expenses, administrative salaries that aren't direct labor, they're indirect costs, that don't do with manufacturing the product, but rather perhaps invoicing or selling or marketing. Depreciation, insurance, licenses and government fees, etc., etc. You can read the list. But when we look at that, basically I want to take that whole list that we just established, that's still on the left-hand side of your screen, and I want to add that up for a certain percentage of time. So worst case, I would say a month. If you can get all of that information with what you paid for all of those overhead indirect expenses for a year, it's going to be better. 3 months or a quarter is better than a month. So basically you want to add all these up for X period of time. and get a total. So it may look something like $10,000, or let's just say $1,500 is what I have in the sample, so let's use that. So if it costs me, $500 for the space in my house that comes off my mortgage that I'm allocating for the business, and then I have $1,000 in other expenses that fall into overhead, basically I want to take all of those indirect expenses and I want to divide that by my direct expenses for the same period. And basically what we're trying to do here is we're trying to get to an overhead rate or an overhead percentage that can be added to every single sale that we make when we calculate costs. So you take those indirect expenses and you divide them by the direct expenses. And hopefully you remember what the direct expenses are. That was all of your manufacturing labor, those shirt costs and freight costs and material costs. Those all fall into direct expenses. So you should take that same period, 3 months of indirect expenses divided by 3 months of direct expenses, and basically that's going to give you your overhead rate. So in the sample, you see our indirect expenses were $1,500. We divide that by 10,000 of direct expenses for the manufacturing costs, and we get a rate of 0.15, which of course to convert to a percentage equals 15%. Now, I'm not sure if everybody calculates overhead, but right now I'd like to launch a poll just to understand if you know an overhead rate for your business. And it's okay if you don't, but if we can launch that, Karen. I'd like you to select the rate represented there that's closest to the overhead rate or percentage that you're using, or if you don't know it, that's fine too. Give it a couple more seconds here. All right, if you can close that off and just share the results with me.
77% said that they have no idea, they haven't calculated. 9% said 10%, 7% 15%.
I'm sorry, you're losing me.
Okay.
Too many percent. So 9% said what?
10%.
Said that they calculated 10%
Correct.
overhead. Got it, thank you.
7% said that they calculated 15%.
Okay.
5% said they calculated 20%. And 2% calculated 30%.
Okay, great. So we have the most that's somewhere, I'd say if we averaged all those responses out, not counting the no ideas, we'd be at around 15% overhead for the shops that we have represented today. I'm sure that the shops of 11 plus people are probably looking more at the 20-30% overhead rate. Typically, if you have a manufacturing space, you have employees, you have a storefront, your overhead goes up. That's one of the advantages of being a small shop out of your home. I'm not suggesting that you should devalue your work when you set the prices, but naturally you're a leaner business, so you should be able to make stuff a little less expensive, all things being equal in the process. Having said that, of course, the big shop can usually drive in more efficiency and management into the process, but that's good. You should know your overhead rate, so if you get nothing else out of this, pay yourself for the work that you're doing and apply overhead to every sale using some sort of calculation. I propose this one. With that in mind, what I want to do is I want to take a look at the sample job that we just calculated, then really dive into our heat transfer film workbook to make this come to life, our cost calculator workbook. And so with what we just created, here's how it all works together. You can see the direct labor and materials for this job, a 33 cents for my 33 cents for my labor rate. That was the 2 minutes of labor, plus the $6.51 that was the cost of my design, plus the cost of my shirt with freight added up, equals $6.84 in direct cost. That's under the guy carrying the lumber and the saw there. So I'm taking that $6.84 and I'm multiplying that by the 15% overhead that was our popular answer here. I had a guess that that would be what we would land at. And so I multiply that by 15% or 0.15 as the overhead rate, and I need to apply $1.03 in overhead to the cost of that job. That's going to give me the total cost to make that product, including all of my expenses, at $7.87. Okay? And so let me show you how the workbook helps once you know some of this. So first off, you go to stahlstv.com. Underneath the Resources tab, when you log in and create an account, you'll see a download a cost calculator. This is exactly what it looks like. I just downloaded the latest version before the class. And you can see, once you get in here, it's going to walk you through step by step. Over on the left-hand side, I'll see step 1, 2, 3, and just follow along logically. So basically the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to input my shop's overhead percentage. So we ended at 15%. I'm going to put that in. Then I want to put in the average hourly rate paid to the heat press employee. If you're paying the heat press employee $12 an hour, punch that in. I'd suggest you pay your heat press employee a good rate because that's where all of the work that's been done in the process can fail if they heat apply inaccurately. It's also where you can get a bad name for your business if they heat apply inaccurately and stuff's washing off. So take care of your heat press employees and make sure you have good training there. Next, the average hourly rate paid to the weeding employee. There is a difference in how fast you can weed based on experience, but we're going to average this at $10 just to have a different rate. So pay yourself, if you're a one-person shop, enter your rate for each part of the process because that's going to keep you disciplined enough that when it comes time to scale your business, you'll already have that cost built in to your pricing strategy and be able to hire people at those rates. All right, I would recommend at this point that once you download this, you would save this with your shop's name on it somewhere on your computer where you can pull it up easily. That way you don't have to enter the information in step one over and over. You probably want to revisit your overhead rate anytime a major change happens and expense goes up, such as a new administrative hire, a new shop space, or moving out of a shop space, whatever. Anytime there's a major change, reevaluate that. Next, we go to step two. Before we do that, are there any questions on step one, Karen? No? Okay. Next, we go to step two. This is where we get specific to the production process of using heat transfer film. So the first thing is the total number of cut designs per garment. So for instance, if we have a two-color design on the front of the shirt, and then I have something out of the same color on the back of the shirt, maybe just a single color design on the back, those are three cut designs because there are three separate steps in weeding, three separate steps in heat application that I need to capture. Okay? If I just did a two-color design on the front of the shirt, it would be two cut designs. So you get it, whether it's placement or color, basically just like screen printing. If you needed to burn a screen for it, you need to calculate it as one of the cut designs because we burn screens for different colors and different sizes. Next, I need to take an average time to weed and mask each cut design. So if there are two designs and one takes me a minute, the other takes me 2 minutes to weed, once you get into the process, you can pretty much look at a design and know how much it's going to take you to weed based on how good you are. I would put a minute and a half in weeding. If I had 2 minutes and 1 minute, we take the average of those two cut designs and say a minute and a half. Next, the average time to heat press each cut design. Well, this is a two-color, and I need to take into account loading the shirt onto the press and also, preheating, all those good things. So I'm going to say a two-color design on the front of a shirt is going to take me about 4 minutes to press. So that's going to be an average of 2 minutes per cut design, per layer in that case. All right, there's a question, so I want to make sure everybody stays at the speed, so I'm going to stop and take it.
Can you explain again where everybody can find the calculator on the website?
Yes, I don't want to bog down my internet speed, but to actually navigate there and show you. But basically, you go to stahlstv.com, and there is a resources tab in the top navigation. It's towards the right-hand side of the top navigation. Once you click on that, you'll see a download called Cost Calculator. As long as you're logged in, you can download it for free. Okay, so next, after I have my sort of labor time and number of cut designs in the heat transfer film, I'm going to enter the cost of the blank garment. Very important that you capture the landed cost here because there's not another place on this calculator to pick up your freight cost. So in the case of that t-shirt example that we did earlier, I want to say the shirt was $1.99, the freight was about 35 cents. So let's call it $2.35 in landed cost for this particular t-shirt that we're going to print. The next thing that's very important that you put is the total number of garments and items sold for this job. So is this let's say this is a 15-piece order. Customer's ordering 15 t-shirts. As soon as I complete that information in step 2, the cool thing is this calculator is not only going to calculate cost for me, but it's going to calculate the production time. I can see based on those input fields I need to budget about 45 minutes for weeding, and I need to budget about an hour for heat pressing. So it should allow me to quote a turn time to my customer pretty quick because I know how much labor I have available. I need 2 hours to complete this job and see if I have capacity for that. Next, I'm going to put in the design size, and this is the last step that's needed for it to actually kick out a cost for you. So remember, we have 2 cut designs. So I don't know, I'm trying to see if I have a good visual of a design here. This is tough to see, but this JM rockets that you see on this little computer screen here, that's a good example. We have gray on top of a larger red color. So ultimately, the gray is smaller than the red. I'm going to say, let's do the red first. That's going to be 8 by 10 inches. And then my placement number 2 would be the gray color inside. That one's about 8 by 8 inches. What that'll do, as soon as you enter your dimensions for each design placement, it's going to tell you how much yardage you're going to need to complete that job based on the input. So I'm going to need about, if I'm using 15-inch wide material, I'm going to need about 4 yards. If I'm using 20-inch wide material, you can see on the 8 by 8 design, I'm going to only need 2 yards versus on the 8 by 10, I'm going to need 3.7. Now, one thing this won't do, it's not smart enough to think about rotating your design for you. So if you really want to get the best, knowing that you can rotate it, try switching the width and the length, and you can see that the material utilization goes down. So try it both ways, and then, you know, obviously you can probably use less than the yardage that it's quoting. I don't want you to over order if this is for some awkward color you're never going to use again. I don't want you to over order, so just be aware it's giving you an estimate on the most yardage that you'll need for that particular color. Okay, once I have all that in, basically it's going to go through all the Stahls materials and it's going to kick out all of my cost components. So let's just take fashion film, which is our most popular material for t-shirts. It's going to tell me I have $1.63 in cost for that particular material. That's based on a 15% waste factor, which is pretty typical. That's like a lead-in edge, a little bit on the edge of the rolls, and a little spacing in between designs, saying I'm wasting about 15% of the material. Obviously, the material that's within the design is already captured as part of the cost, so you don't have to worry about that. Heat press cost based on the inputs is going to cost me 80 cents. Weeding and masking, for this, it does masking because this is also a calculator for print cut. But we didn't have to input masking costs. It was just weeding time is 50 cents. It applies that overhead based on the percentage, and the calculation that we just learned is 79 cents. And my garment cost just carries over. So I can see my per piece cost on this job is $6.08 out of fashion film. It multiplies that by your, I think, 15 pieces we put in to get $91.13. The cool thing is now, not only does it calculate it for fashion film, but it calculates it for glitter flake. So if I wanted to give the customer an upsell opportunity, a way to upgrade that shirt for a better selling price, I can see it's only going to cost me $18 more for the whole job. Of course, it may cost a little more in weeding time, but you can make the quick alteration there as well on the average time to weed the design if you want to get a truer look based on what it would take you in glitter flake. But it's cool. It kicks it out. You can see it across a variety of materials, and you can see it broken down by every piece of the process. It applies labor. It applies overhead, which are 2 big things that most shops miss, and that's why they often don't have the profits that they expect. Questions or comments right now, Karen? You guys are a quiet group. It's good. Hopefully digesting it all. You can go through this cost calculator. There's different tabs. We sort of locked it down so the formulas stay protected, but if you want to update cost data for the particular materials and your ordering habits, any of the yellow highlighted fields you can change. So if I happen to get a better rate on fashion film because I order all in 50-yard rolls, I can say my average price per square foot is $1.20. And then that will update in the calculator. Just make sure you update your cost data and save it as you see fit. Also, the yardage data just shows you the usable width. So if I own a Graph Tech cutter, I know that I can probably use 14.25 or 19 inches. But if I can't cut in front of my pinch rollers on my cutter, maybe I only have an 18-inch usable width. So I just change these to the proper usable width for the material, and that way it'll calculate your yards needed accurately. But I would update the cost data tab, the yardage data tab, and the step 1 information once, save it, and then all you have to do is job info and design size info. So we have a couple questions.
Is total job cost what you sell to the customer, the price that you would sell to the customer?
No, total job cost is simply what it's going to cost you to produce. We're going to talk about a strategy for setting selling prices now, next, now that we understand what it actually costs us to make.
Is glitter flake the same for tearaway and cut in the cutter?
Glitter flake, if you buy it, the CAD-CUT glitter flake, yes, it's the same for the rip away process and cutting in a cutter.
And what do you use for average price for material?
Okay, yeah, so the average price that comes stock in the cost data is basically the price of a 1 yard cut all the way up to the 50 yard increment. So the per yard price for a 1, a 5, a 10, a 25, and a 50. And then we add in a little freight. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head per yard. I think 10 cents of freight per yard. And then we divide it by the number of yardage increments to give us just a baseline average. So 100% perfect, no, but you can make it 100% perfect if you understand your inputs, or most people are happy to operate on this average knowing that they're going to be covered. Okay, I'm going to switch back to the PowerPoint. All right, so with that in mind, what I want to do is, since this is the cost portion, I want to give you some tips to reduce costs sort of as we work our way into setting selling prices, because we're moving at a pretty good pace. One, I mentioned this already, group your garment orders to save freight. Freight costs can eat you alive, so try to order smart when it comes to garments. That's why it's cool to have 10 different vendors, but having that primary vendor of blank apparel is also going to allow you to group different shirt styles for different customer jobs and save freight. 2, stock core color offerings of CAD-CUT materials. Basically, if you have the top 10 colors in stock or the top 7 colors in stock, you can order them in an efficient way in larger rolls and not have to pay freight on them. It's going to allow you to really have the best cost possible on the material. So I always recommend stocking the popular colors. And under the Resources tab of Stahls TV, the same place you can download this cost calculator, we've ran our order history, and we actually give you a list of the most popular colors per material in another download there. 3, aim for efficiency in weeding. And actually, as I'm talking about this, I'm going to ask Karen if she can pull up a video that we played in the intro, which is her weeding. So for those of you that don't know Karen, here she is. And she's on the, and I'm getting a good look right now, she's on the Stahls Easy Weeding table. Basically, weeding is the most time-consuming part of the process. And so for those of you that have been watching Stahls TV, you know we released a product called the Stahls Easy Weeding table that basically takes what we're finding is at a minimum 20% savings of time, and what we've heard is a maximum is about 80% savings in time in weeding the same job for hot or warm peel material. So we've sold a ton of these already, and I've personally called at least a dozen customers who bought this to get their feedback, and all of them are citing that they love it and that they're saving a lot of time, because the idea here is, if you saw Karen there, she threw away the glitter flake all in a single piece because it warms it so it's not breaking. And so she goes in and picks the centers. You can see you can incline it, but basically by improving your weeding speeds with the use of heating up the material on the table, you're going to save time, which, as we know, equals cost in the labor component of this job. So instead of it averaging me 2 minutes per shirt to weed, it may only take me a minute 12 or 1.25, a minute 15 to weed. And that's going to be direct cost savings on producing that job. And I always tell people, especially you small shops, it's going to be opportunity costs that you're going to save. So instead of sitting there weeding a job into the night, you're going to be saving your time selling. And so we have complete videos on this. You can see all about it. But this is really a cool product that's going to save you time. As she finishes up here, you can see we're going to save considerable. There's some questions coming in. I see what the other product I mentioned, the resource that you need to look up on Stahls, if you go to stahlstv.com under the resources, is the top selling colors. And let me see how my internet connection's doing, if I can get you there real quick. Show you where it's at. So Stahls TV, go to resources, click it. You want to make sure you're logged in, but right here you can see top CAD-CUT materials and colors that you can download. It'll give you a list. You can also download the cost calculator that we're using. There's some other helpful resources here. I'd recommend you download them all and take a look if you haven't. We even have a blank apparel vendor guide that we've just added. Okay, so that's a little bit about the weeding table and really aim for efficiency in weeding to reduce cost. Still some more questions. You guys are getting active now. I like it.
Is the weeding table available in Canada?
The weeding table is not currently available in Canada, but it will be. We're working to get it. I don't remember the exact regulation that it has to get approved at for equipment, but we're working to make sure it has that approval to be able to sell it in Canada safely. Okay, so after you aim for efficiency in weeding, not only through the weeding table, but by using the top weeding tips, which is also a helpful download here, top 10 tips for weeding CAD-CUT material just to save time, we can ultimately win the war on waste. And so I put size design smartly. You wouldn't believe how much material and waste it saves you just to understand how you can space material across the roll. So something, for instance, if I'm selling on the front of a woman's t-shirt, a lady's t-shirt, and I have 20-inch wide material, knowing that I have 19-inch wide of cuttable space, I usually don't try to present a graphic that's larger than 9 inches one way or another, because I know I can always fit 2 across that way. Subsequently, if I had a 15-inch material, I'd probably try to present graphics that were 7 inches wide max, either in the width or the height, so I know I can fit 2 across. So as you're designing and presenting, often you have the creative freedom to present what you want and come up with an idea. So try to present something that's sort of the orientation allows you to nest accurately across the material. Secondly, I have pre-feed. Basically what that means on your vinyl cutter, I know it always makes me angry when you start cutting a job and you're 5 feet into it and it runs off track. So pre-feed your material before you send your cut job to make sure the cutter is going to track accurately. That'll save you waste. Test cut. So basically creating a test cut to make sure your blade's dialed in accurately for cutting the material, and then of course using a sharp blade. One of the biggest issues is everybody wants to save $18 or $30 on a blade, and so you end up wasting a lot more in vinyl by using a dull blade, and a lot more in weeding time by using a dull blade and frustrating yourself. Just stock blades and use a sharp blade. It's going to make your life easier for cutting. I'm getting ready to switch over to the pricing exercise, but before I do that, let's switch back on camera and take a couple questions.
Can you say how much the weeding table is for everybody?
Yeah, the weeding table currently, as of the airing of this episode, is $599, and the special we're running this month is free shipping. So if you're interested in that, I think I put a question in the survey at the end, but just in case I forgot, just type, please call on weeding table now, and we'll make sure we reach out to you and get you set up. You won't be disappointed in that one, I guarantee it.
Do you have to have Excel to use the cost calculator specifically for people who have Macs?
That's a good question. It is designed in Excel. I'm not a Mac user personally. I don't know if you can open an Excel document in a Mac if there's a conversion on that as well. Unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that one, but it is created in Excel.
If you have rolls of basic stock colors of material, how long is the material good to use?
Shelf life on material, if kept in proper storage conditions, means low humidity, not extreme high heat, not extreme cold, is, I say indefinitely. Realistically, I think a couple years, you're going to be safe.
And typically, how long do blades last?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. There's not a good answer, because it depends on how much you cut and how intricate your designs are and whether you're dialed in correctly. I can say that I've cut 500 yards of glitter flake material out of one blade because it was dialed in perfectly. Did I need to increase the downforce over time? Yes, I did. And I was running a Graphtec cutter, so I had, overcut on, which gave me a little bit of tolerance and not having exactly perfect cuts on the corner. I don't know. Users cite anywhere from probably 1 to 3 months, I think, is a safe range. If you're in the year range and you've done a fair amount of cuttings, it's time. All right, I got the thumbs up. I think we're good. So let's switch back to the PowerPoint and talk about pricing. So with a proper understanding of cost, including your direct labor, your overhead, and all those good things, then we start to say, okay, I have the cost. What should I sell it for? And I'm not going to be able to tell you exactly what to sell it for, but my goal is to basically give you a philosophy on pricing or a strategy. So before we dive deep, I'm going to launch the poll that asks, do you currently have a pricing strategy? Once again, if the answer is no, we won't hold this against you. I'm just curious to know. And if there was a response that said, that's why I'm attending this class, you probably would check that, right? All right, let's close it off. What are our results?
69% said yes, and 31% said no.
Okay, fantastic. So it's good. So basically, for those of you with a price strategy, perhaps you saw a class here before or got advice from somebody else along the way, or maybe you came up with it yourself. So this is aimed to basically say a price strategy is a good thing, and the right price strategy is an even better thing. So I'm going to throw out some of my thoughts on it, and ultimately you can draw your own conclusions and implement what you want for your business. But bad pricing is an epidemic that leads to out of business. So basically selling things that don't make you profit basically leads to you not being able to grow the business and eventually closing the doors in most cases, unless you're a nonprofit and then there's a different mission. So what I want to do is look at, ask you some questions really, and if you've been to this class before, you've probably seen this slide where I completed the exercise we just went through on calculating costs for this shirt design. I took all of those cost comparison and I got a fashion film design on the front of this Gildan 50/50 t-shirt at 12 pieces. It cost me $535 all in. What do I sell this for? Type in your response now. What would you sell this for? So right in the questions tab, if you can just type in your response, and Karen, if we have anything coming in, if you could share with me some of the numbers. I assume we're all over the board. Let me know if I'm wrong.
I'm seeing anywhere from $4 to around $20.
So I'm assuming that's $4 profit. So I'm going to say $10 to $20 from a selling price. Okay, 10 to 25 at 12 pieces. Makes sense. All right, let's do this again. Same design, just a little bit different material for performance wear. The cost per piece on this one is $9.58. What would you sell it for? If you can type in your response. And Karen, if you can share with me the range.
Mostly between 20 and 25.
20 and 25 for a nice long sleeve performance tee. All right, a couple more of these. Thanks for playing along here. This one, we have this beautiful Spirit jersey. 12 pieces, replica jersey, fan jersey, glitter flake now. Cost per piece is $13.82. Obviously, the blank's a little bit more expensive. What do you sell this for? What do we got? Lots of responses coming in. Thank you.
Around 25 to 40. 25
to 40. You guys are good. All right, and last example, jacket now. We're doing a $38.28 is the cost to put that thermofilm design on the jacket. Could easily be any material. It's a polyester soft shell at 12 pieces. What do you sell this for?
Between 50 and 80.
50 and 80. Okay, good. So we went through that exercise. Obviously, I would guess the folks that were on the low side stuck on the low side because that is consistent with the pricing philosophy that you've put in, and the folks on the high side probably ran on the high side. And a lot of it, I won't deny, has to do with the market that you're in and the pricing that you've learned that you can command. And it also has a lot to do with your go-to-market strategy and how you're selling. And I'm going to get to that momentarily, but before I do, let me go through a couple pricing philosophies on this PowerPoint that I personally dislike that have been taught. Number one is the keystone method. The keystone method is basically taking your cost and doubling it for a selling price. In this case, the keystone method, I believe, leaves me short on the t-shirt, especially at the 12-piece quantity. Selling at $10.70 a shirt at a 12-piece quantity, I'm only going to net $5.35 profit per shirt for my work. Also, perhaps it leaves me priced out of the market on the jacket. I know some of you thought you could command $80, so it may work for you, but others, it may price you out of the market on the particular jacket. All things being equal, it takes you pretty close to the same amount of time to decorate the t-shirt as it's going to take you to decorate the jacket. At the heat press, in the cutting, in the weeding. So why would you sell one piece for $5.35 in profit while the other piece you would require $38 in profit? That's why I think the keystone method could leave you short. Next, I want to talk about markup percentage or gross margin, which is how a lot of businesses in various industries operate. They say we need to have X amount of gross margin or we're not taking the sale. So in this case, I said the business rule was we need to have 28.5% gross margin or we're not taking a sale. I certainly think that you should have your bottom pricing strategy as low as you're willing to go or you're not taking the sale. Otherwise, you won't have the sort of business or pricing rules and you can leave yourself extremely unprofitable. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I think it's going to leave you short once again when we look at this. If we look at that t-shirt, for the same amount of work, you can see the profitability making a couple dollars per shirt on a 12-piece order is probably going to leave me not making the type of profit with my time that I have. This is extremely important for those of you with limited throughput, whether that's with limited amount of equipment or even just limited hours in the day because there's only so many operators in the business that can produce jobs. You don't want to spend your time for minimal profit. At the end of a 8-hour shift, you'll end up much shorter than you would with the pricing strategy I'm going to show you. Here's what I like. I like market value, which my gut is that many of you understand that it's what I can command for it. And I've talked about it many times before. I love the model of profit per piece. So in this case, what I had was a minimum profit per piece that I wanted to make. Understanding that the t-shirt and the jacket and the fan jersey, everything in between, take me about the same amount of time, I want to make sure that when that heat press locks down, I make a certain minimum profit per piece. And this pricing philosophy can translate over to when you drag the squeegee for screen printing, when you direct the garment print the shirt, or when you hoop and embroider a garment. So in this case, I'm telling you minimum profit per piece. But I'm also saying that your profit per piece doesn't have to be a one-size-fits-all. Basically, your profit per piece can vary based on the item. For instance, your profit per piece on this bucket of items in the t-shirt category may be $7 or $10 based on what I'm willing to do that for. And consequently, on the jacket, you can see we may want to command a higher profit per piece. Why? Because, yes, although it takes the same amount of time, there is increased risk. So if I ruin one or waste one, it's much more costly to the process. Same thing with performance wear. It's a little bit more difficult to decorate, so I would encourage you to put a higher profit per piece goal, and obviously right size for your market. We had a comment or a question, Karen?
A couple of questions. How could a decorator figure out what the market will bear when they're selling shirts for $20 and gift stores are selling them for as low as $5?
So I think, great question. And what the market will bear depends on a lot of things. So it's not necessarily, I know a lot of people sell local. I almost wish I had put the poll question in there. Do you sell just to a local market or a national into another niche? But I think as you think about your pricing strategy in the market that you're going to reach, being able to differentiate yourself, which is my next slide, is going to be extremely important, especially when we're talking personalized or customized product with heat transfer films. So the idea here is what's in the power of my grasp versus a gift shop. The gift shop's a screen printed shirt. You go in, you're going to buy the size that's on the shelf in most cases, the design that's on the shelf on the color of garment, without an option for personalization. But as somebody that owns a vinyl cutter and a heat press, you can add much more uniqueness really into the process where we can personalize, or we can reach markets that that gift shop owner will not. So we shouldn't be trying, you know, if you're competing a lot on price with a gift shop with a certain type of design or a certain style of shirt, those are typically screen printed. They're buying in bulk, and therefore their cost is much lower. And so what you need to do is separate yourself when you form a strategy, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how to do that after I take a couple more questions.
If somebody orders one shirt, do you charge more for just the one than you would for 12 or more shirts?
I absolutely charge more for one shirt. So the one piece that wasn't in my cost calculator that I meant to cover is art and setup. And time, really. It's going to take you as much time to order one shirt as it would to order 36 shirts. So you're going to have more sort of administrative expense in the process on one. You're also going to have more art setup on one, because that art time that it takes to create the design is going to be the same whether it's 1 or 1,000. And so what I would recommend doing is that you put in a fee for a low quantity. If you're minimum 6 or 12, that makes sense. I would definitely recommend building your pricing tiers out based on quantity. Even though the material cost is relatively the same, the art cost, the setup, the management cost of managing that job is going to be higher. Continuing on that point, I'd recommend separating your art out from your pricing. I would charge an art fee depending on the artwork. So $30 a half hour, $50 a half hour for art setup if they don't provide a vector-ready file, which is very rare.
And how do you decide profit per piece?
Profit per piece, I hate to say it's a personal question, but it's kind of a shop question. I think it depends on the niche that you're reaching and the garment that you're decorating. So, for instance, it also depends on how busy you are. So a lot of shops will have a profit per piece of $5. Mine would be 10 from the fact that I work a full-time job. If I'm going to be pressing shirts part-time at night, there's a very limited window of hours where I can actually press shirts. So I'm going to make sure I'm not printing the job if it's not high profit. Now for a shop that needs to stay busy, basically if the equipment's sitting there and you can't sell at $10 profit per piece, it's not making you money. So it's finding where that mark is for your shop. So obviously any profit can be good profit. You just want to make sure that you're not having to turn away jobs. If you're having to turn away jobs because you don't have capacity or can't get them done quick enough, that's a dead giveaway that you need to inch that profit per piece up. So you can start, I would recommend starting high, and then you can always discount or run specials or offers. It's much tougher to raise your price on your existing client base. So $5 would be my minimum for a good production shop. Is that it, Karen? These are fun questions. Hopefully the responses are making sense. I'm trying to make them as clear as possible for advice. So back to this fighting competition. So really you'll be able to charge a higher profit per piece if you can get out of the commodity. So I recommend a book. It's called Blue Ocean Strategy. It talks about creating uncontested market space, basically finding niches or things that aren't done before, and it applies to pretty much any style of business, but finding a place where you can be different, where you're not in the red ocean or the bloody waters fighting with the sharks over the same business. So here's 3 steps I'm going to give you to being able to make more profit and set higher selling prices. Basically, if you move into a storefront and you think that's going to cure all your issues, I don't think that's the case. I think you need to have the right strategy, the right go-to-market for whatever you're doing. So here's the steps to success I recommend. Number 1, define your target market. And I think a good business often has many different target markets, but if the target market's worth reaching, typically you have an offer specific to each target. So define your target market and then define your offer. And then step 3 is call and attract people to that offer that are within that market. So let's go through that a little bit more in depth. Step number 1, define your target market. So I put a bunch on the board. I like to talk about spirit wear since our glitter material is one of the hottest selling and people are making good profit with it. So I look at this list and I say, let's take dance schools, for instance. If I want to say dance schools are one of the markets I'm going to target. My pricing strategy and my offer to a dance school is probably going to be different than it would be to a hospital or to a bank. Much different needs, different offer, different go-to-market strategy. So figure out, here are the markets I'm going to reach with my business. And that even is important when you're branding your business, coming up with a name in the infant stages. Number 2 is define an offer. This is really a sales strategy. If dance schools is my market, okay, what garment styles can I offer to dance schools? Watching Stahls TV and the morning show and some of the reading our blank apparel wholesale guide, you can get basically plugged into trendy styles for your market. And so in this case, it would be nice if I can come up with some garment styles that are different than what everybody else is offering, because then it's not like I'm pricing the white t-shirt or the pink t-shirt versus the pink t-shirt. I can get, you know, a lace back tank. I can get a macrame fringe tank that's static print from Cavio. I can get, you know, a trendy piece from Bella Canvas. You know, these are all apparel brands, and that's why trade shows are so important too, because you can walk through these booths, check out styles, and really create something cool that's outside of the red ocean that everybody else is competing with. Secondly, art is an important part of the offer. If you can figure out, you know, these pieces of art I already have set up because I've done them through, you know, Transfer Express or CAD Works or something that's a little bit easier, I can reduce my cost on art, and that's part of the offer, the artwork that I'm going to present. Usually I recommend you define your pricing before you ever make a sales call to a dance school. It'd be nice to say, here are the garments and styles that I'm going with. Here's the choices, and you know what? You can do it in basic, you can do it in foil, or you can do it in glitter onto that lace back tank. And here's the price per each at the quantities. When you're structured and you have printed pieces of pricing, especially if it's in person, or published pricing in a PDF or online, there's much less room, perceived room, for negotiation. If somebody asks you for a discount, ask the question why. And sometimes that will back them off of the question of a discount immediately. Or ask them if I can overcome if it basically is price the primary concern, and make them commit to, if you can overcome price, they'll move forward with you. Often they'll say, no, price isn't the primary concern, it's more about delivery. Okay, so it sounds like delivery is the primary concern. If we can meet your delivery terms, then we could move forward on this order. So basically trying to get down to a singular objection, and by having structured pricing with the offer, you can stand strong and present your price strategy up front. Second, build it into a program. And so something that's duplicatable and repeatable, to where I can take this program out to dance schools across the country or across the region, however I want to do it, or hospitals or banks, whatever I define the offer for. If you build it into a program, basically you can build it in such a way that there's value for who you're selling to. So what are the needs of the buyer? If I'm selling to a dance school owner, perhaps it's more about them making some money for the studio. So yes, the dancers and the dance moms and dads are going to pay $25 per the shirt. Out of every shirt, we're going to kick back $5 to the studio. So something like that is putting together a program for the market that you defined. Next is calling and attracting. So you have the offer, you have it all, you have the target market, and then this is just sales and marketing 101. There's many ways to sell and market. We try to teach you some of them on Stahls TV. There's way too many to go through today, but the idea that I'm going to build a list, I'm going to look for customers in that market, and I'm going to go and win the business. If you're hearing that noise, it's a little bit of thunder outside, so hopefully our connection stays good here in southwestern Pennsylvania. What type of questions do we have, Karen?
Kind of going back to customers purchasing items, if they buy one and say that that's a sample and that they'll come back for more, how would you price that?
Usually, I like the idea of charging them for the sample and saying the sample cost can be credited to their order. That way they're on the hook. or the difference of, you know, $20 or whatever the difference is can be credited to their order, because yeah, just in my time in business, often there's a lot of empty promises. So you want to make sure that you recoup the expense.
We have kind of a scenario. One of the viewers used to have a direct-to-garment printer, and they could print one shirt, but now they order full color transfers from Stahls. So what's the best way to communicate minimum orders to their customers?
You know, I think with that, it's defining the offer. Like if you're speaking of the CAD prints, full color transfers, and I think this is my last slide, so we can switch back to the camera. If you're talking CAD prints, full color transfers, you know, there's a $25 minimum order. You know, a transfer is going to cost you a minimum of $1, probably best case for a left chest, something like that. So I think a 25-piece order is a great, you know, I like communicating minimums in pieces, not necessarily dollars, because you have no idea what the dollars is going to be. It depends on the design and so many factors. So I think, you know, a piece quantity is the way to go on minimums. All right, so if you have any additional questions, now's the time. Did I launch all my polls, Karen? Okay, I launched all my polls. So I'm going to stick around for a couple more minutes because I think I finished, yeah, pretty much ahead of schedule, the revised schedule at least, and answer any questions that you may have. If you need to log out now, please complete the survey at the end. That's how we get your feedback for future classes and really can understand your business better to present content. I'm going to stick around for any additional questions for about 5 or 10 minutes. Got some coming in? Okay.
Is there a calculator that you use for your applique that you could point the viewers to?
I don't have a cost calculator for applique right now, but I suppose you could use the... No, I don't know if... I'd have to think about whether we could revise this one. Right now we don't have anything, but you know, we'll put that on our short list. I think it'd be something that would be valuable. Thank you. All right, that's all the questions. So we're going to conclude. If you have any additional questions, the Stahls TV forum is a great place to get them answered. As always, thanks for attending the Stahls TV live presentation. Have a great rest of your week.